The panel discussion is going to center around fostering interdisciplinary innovation, uniting change makers through interactive collaboration. And in this panel, we shall explore the power of interdisciplinary collaboration in fostering innovation by bringing together change makers from diverse fields. And we aim to uncover how interactive collaboration can drive meaningful change and innovation. Through their insights, we'll delve into the strategies and approaches that promote effective interdisciplinary teamwork and drive impactful innovation forward. So to start off, I'd like to welcome the moderator for this panel. Let's put our hands together for Sudipto Paul, partner, McKinsey. A round of applause for Mr. Paul, please. And let's keep the applause going for our esteemed panelists. Kishore Jayaraman, President, India and South Asia, Rolls-Royce. Welcome, sir. Dr. Sanjeev Panchal, Country President and Managing Director, AstraZeneca, India. Keep that applause coming, ladies and gentlemen. And Shalabh Mittal, Managing Director, Head of Strategy and Transformation, Barclays, GSC. I do realize that the panelists' insights are definitely going to have you left with a lot of questions post the panel, but in the interest of time, we might not be able to do a Q&A session. So in that event, we would have to take the questions offline. Mr. Paul, handing it over to you, sir.
Am I audible? Okay, that's great. Morning, everybody. I think it's lovely to be here, this August gathering, and a very exciting topic. I mean, a great setup to the day from Dr. Jere. Thank you for setting us up for that. I think the one topic as you go through the day, the fact that we'll see is innovation is fundamental to growth. I don't think anybody in this room is going to kind of disagree with that's a fundamental aspect, right? I think the second fact that's quite fundamental is that innovation's getting faster. What would possibly have taken, I mean, depending on whichever way you look at it, right? The facts kind of indicate that innovation today is about 4 times faster than what it was a couple of decades back, right? So 2 facts, right? It's important, it's getting faster, right? But interestingly, the other fact, and we at McKinsey, we run a global innovation survey, right? We do this globally every year with all the CXOs. And the survey found that just about 6% of global CXOs are actually satisfied with innovation performance, okay? And that's an interesting fact, right? That it's getting faster, it's getting important, right? But only 6% of them are satisfied with what they deliver. Now, what the survey also found that those companies who actually, and the fundamental difference between the people who are successful versus not is on what they focus on, right? And the finding was that most companies are focused on the what. Is it a business model innovation? Is it a product innovation? Is it a service innovation, right? Versus the how, okay? And Dr. Jere alluded to the fact that it's actually the how which really ends up differentiating, the people who create value versus the others, okay? The other finding that this survey came out is, interestingly, those companies that actually master the how, okay, they deliver 2.5 times more economic profit than the others, okay? So that's an interesting one, right? Over the long term, right, if you were to take a long-term steady state view, you're kind of delivering 2.5 times more value than the others, okay? The question then arises that, what really represents this how, okay? And at least as we've looked at it, closely, companies that kind of excel at the how, they basically manage to get 3 things right, okay? Which is, 1, really about organizing, okay? The second is about mobilizing, and the third is about aligning, right? And these 3 elements, okay, are fundamental about driving interdisciplinary innovation, okay? It's about, fundamentally, the pointer is you can't innovate alone, you can't innovate in isolation, right? And that's where getting interdisciplinary or cross-functional collaboration comes together. I think with that context, right, maybe we start with, Sanjeev, you, right? I think the whole point about organizing for innovation, okay, and we kind of, you've seen this in the pharma world, and I mean, the pharma world can't do without innovation, right? So, your thoughts on how have you seen companies organize?
Thank you very much, Sudipto, for this opportunity. Um, I think the fundamental thing to start with how we drive as a company is the purpose of the company, and that starts for every company for sure. But for us, is how do we push the boundaries of science to bring the medicines to the world and reduce the disease burden, and that requires innovation. So what we did as a company, first of all, by saying our whole strategy of a company is growth through innovation, because we want to, and that's a stated strategy for a company, that if we want to bring change in the diseases and elevate the disease burden, we need to innovate medicines in different form and shape. So first of all, start with purpose. And second part is we define our company strategy by saying we need to grow as a company by bringing innovative medicines to this world. That's number one. Number two is how do we bring that innovation into R&D, from R&D to the world. So what we are doing now is when we are innovating drugs, we are really looking at what are the difficult challenges which the world is facing. And I can give an example of, let's say, cancer. In cancer is such a debilitating disease. We need to bring innovation there. We have seen over many years that we don't have solutions to help the patient. So we are bringing drugs, and we are innovating different platforms so that we can bring that innovation. So again, bringing innovation is becoming fundamental, and the purpose of doing that. And number three of this is that when we are doing in different countries, how do we really actually bring that into each country? So for India, for example, we really believe that all this innovation can't happen, as you rightly said, alone. Now, the whole pharma sector can say that if you can bring medicine alone, it's not possible. You have to collaborate by academia, by government, by institutes, private institutes, public institutes, all put together have to come together to ensure that innovation is embedded right from a strategy, but also at a very ground level. So we have something called as AI Catalyst Network, which is like top 20 innovation hubs in the world, which are connecting together to bring innovation to the country. And we have a bio venture hub, which is in Gothenburg, which is really bringing startups and bringing those startups into a one place where is large pharma and small startups can come together for the innovation. So the premise is this: we have a purpose to improve and bring science to patient, but we are really driven by a purpose and a strategy to bring growth through innovation in our company and make the change. I'll start with this, and then I'll talk about some examples what we are doing in India as we go ahead.
No, I think what you alluded to are two fundamental points, right? You talked about how you're organizing internally, right? The whole cancer, part of it, as well as how you're organizing externally, right? I mean, through partnerships. And I think that's a fundamental tenet, right? And Shalabh, maybe, going over to you, right? In the world of GCCs, financial services, right? It's a very different one from pharma, okay? But how do you see the organizational, part of innovation, right? And driving cross-functional collaboration, how is that playing out there?
Sure. So I think, first of all, thank you, Dr. Jayaraman, for setting up it so nicely. I think a few things which you talked about, which was design thinking, collaboration with academia and all, I think are really fundamentals on how you start driving innovation. And we at Barclays are doing quite a few of those things. So it was very heartening to listen to your keynote on that. Now, coming back to the question in specific, I think before we go deeper into how we do it and how we organize, I think one thing which I would want to mention to the group is, oftentimes we think innovation as something which is big and of course creating a lot of value and something totally revolutionary. But if you also look at the data from US Patents and Trademarks Office, lots of the patents which are filed are for incremental innovation, which is things like systems and methods. That's the category which they formally define. Again, the point which I want to underline is, while everyone thinks of innovation as big, grand things, let's not discount the value of incremental innovation, because that pushes a lot of things. And I was seeing some quotes outside from Jeff Bezos and all, which were showing things similar. So I just wanted to get that definition of innovation at least grounded. Now, we, within Barclays, so we are, of course, a financial services organization. We are a bank, and I am from a technology part of that bank. I think one thing which is fundamental, no technology, no bank. So technology is what pushes the banks these days. I mean, that's what, so it's not a bank anymore, it's more about banking. We have a pretty matured way on how we approach innovation, which ultimately helps on improving the customer service, better products, etc. Now, how we do it is, I would say, maybe a couple of steps there. Number one, and it always starts with an idea. So how do you ensure that the ideas which your people have, and globally, the things which I'm talking about are more global in nature. So how do you capture those ideas in the first place so that they don't get lost? And we have pretty mature system. We have an idea hub as an example where people go and submit their ideas. And there are teams which look at those ideas, curate them, and validate them. So I would say that's the first step on how we are organized. And that is independent of the organization structure, whether we have business units or LOBs. So that runs across the organization. That's number one. Number two, given an idea now, how do you start taking it to closure? Because again, lots of ideas, but then how do you implement some bit of it, which is, I think, a question which Sudipto started with. So what we do is this implementation has to be done by people. So how do we accelerate the learning of those people? How do we enable our people to take some of those ideas forward? Which is where, again, lots of events on accelerated learning like hackathons and other things come in. So lots of sessions, for example, on Gen AI these days as to how do you leverage that. Everybody is talking about it, but then how do you use it to make some tangible impact? How do you set up context which Gen AI can use? So enabling our people through trainings, accelerated learning, etc. That's step number two. Step number three is how do you provide a platform to people to innovate? And when I say platform, it could be a technology platform, or it could be platform as simple as, let's say, a working space or something like that. So on the technology side, as an example, we have some partners like AWS Bedrock, which is essentially a machine learning environment for generating a lot of Gen AI applications. So we actually provide that to people. We partner with a few other companies who kind of promote these platforms where people can experiment. So essentially a safe working environment for people to experiment on, and on the real estate as well. So we have created certain spaces where people can go and experiment. And again, the use cases don't just get dropped there, they get taken forward. So setting up the right platform is another thing. The other thing which is very, very important, if you look at the startup data, lots of startup ideas fail because, and almost like stats say that 90% of them fail because there's no product market fit. Now, how do we enable that? We are a GCC, so we don't, for example, we don't have a branch here. So how do our technologists who are working on, let's say, a retail banking application know what exactly is happening in retail banking? So we've set up some centers which are kind of experience centers which give them a feel of what the customer wants. So trying to understand that, and then using design thinking, like you said, get it more to a practical stage. So I think that's how you move from essentially idea to enabling people to setting up of a platform, and then getting the context of business. And then of course it's all about how do you fund and how do you implement that, which we have a mechanism to track throughout the life cycle. So that's pretty much, I would say, is the how of how we are doing it at Barclays. We have a pretty matured ecosystem. We have an open innovation cell, which is called Rise by Barclays, which has almost 1,000 startups associated with them. And there are some tangible outcomes in there.
No, I think that's a very interesting allude, right? I mean, what you described as multiple elements of the mobilized head, okay, right? Dr. Jayde, you talked about hackathons, okay? But it's interesting about how you're using hackathons to kind of mobilize, how you're using idea hubs or using, these experience centers to kind of mobilize and bring people together. I think in that context, Kishore, maybe coming into you, right? And I mean, I know you're a big fan of the collaboration theme, right? And the space that you work with, I mean, getting internal and external, structures to work together is absolutely fundamental, right? So what do you see, right, in terms of driving cross-functional, interdisciplinary, what works?
Well, morning, everyone. We're just trying to collect all my thoughts, listening to my colleagues here on the dais, and so that I don't repeat myself. And Dr. Jayde, it was a pleasure to hear your keynote address. I'm very, very impressed with the amount of work that's being done by AICTE and the education sector in India. And there's still a long way to go, and I think innovation forms a part of it. And now when I look at this and I say, look, when Rolls-Royce came to India, way back, 1932, we were just selling stuff in India. And then we formed partnerships. We went the journey of getting into more and more technology products. We did a lot of these things as we moved along. The when we come around, the tipping point happened, I would say, around 2010 timeframe, when we said we're going to employ the capabilities of India. And then we had to look at it, and over a period of time, we saw the capacities that was available in India, and so capabilities, capacities, though that journey got fulfilled. But then we went into joint ventures, manufacturing, digital, multiple different areas, and now we are into co-creation. So when you look at this journey, I look at and say that there are two factors. One is the scalability. And the first point is when you're trying to scale up a business, everything else takes a backseat. You're not looking at innovation, you're looking at your product, you're looking at your service, you're looking at the market, and you're trying to figure out a way into the market. And then the next question comes one of sustainability. Now that you got a little amount of scale, now the question is, where do you go from here? So you get into the sustainability of the business, not sustainability from climate change point of view, but sustainability from a business point of view. Now, when you get into the sustainability of the business, you start looking at how do you optimize the business, and this is when things start getting very interesting from a innovation point of view. Innovation is in many different ways, but I'll just speak to it from a business point of view. And when we looked at innovation, it was innovation, but there's always a what do we innovate? There's always a why do we need to innovate? And then once you have figured out what the what is and why is, like Sudipto brought out, the how is the key. And when you look at how to do it, we have been through many different cycles. And through this whole process, we found that they're interdisciplinary. And in our case, it'll be the functions, it'll be the different businesses that we have, it'll be the academia, the industry, the government. How do we collaborate? And that's my first C. And collaboration across all the stakeholders becomes a key for innovation. The number 2 point when we look at it is people should be able to clearly articulate what needs to happen, when it needs to happen, and how it needs to happen. So the clarity of thought is going to be very, very, very important. And I think the third piece of this whole equation is culture. The culture of the company should be like a startup. A startup is always looking to survive. There's always a hunger, there's always a passion to make the product or service successful. And that passion should always be in there. A purpose to why we do this should always be in there. And at the end of it all, it drives the culture of the company. And the culture of the company is to collaborate and is to make sure that you solve problems with clarity, you're outcomes focused. That culture is going to drive the interdisciplinary innovation. Now we'll go into the depths of it with examples as we go forward, but I want to leave with you the 3 C's that has been very helpful for us as we built our business over the last, I've been there for 13 years with the company, but I think our journey started somewhere in 2005 in India, the real journey, but we've been in India since 1932. So that said, I think we should talk a little bit more about the 3 C's and that how it helps the interdisciplinary innovation.
No, I think that's an interesting allude, right? So I think all across, right, all 3 of you have commented on various elements of how do we configure, right? Okay, and how do we structure and how do we mobilize, right? I mean, through squads, through ideation, through experience centers, right? You talked about the external partnerships. I think the next question that logically comes up is, well, you can structure and you can organize people to collaborate, okay? But how do you actually get them to deliver, okay? Right? So, and that's where I want to segue to the next point, which is how do we really, how have you seen these teams actually deliver A-quality, high-quality innovation, right? Any thoughts in, you've talked about clarity of purpose, okay? But any thoughts on how is that getting reflected in alignment of real targets, alignment of incentives, right? Alignment of purpose. Okay, it's a tough thing to do, right? Because we humans will usually tend to be very creative, and creativity translates in very ways, right? So maybe starting with you, Sanjeev.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Jayaraman said about being entrepreneurial is an important aspect for innovation. So we took a purpose and a problem definition. We do it in hackathon. So we said how in India we have taken an ambition, let's say, eliminate lung cancer as a cause of death. That is a big thing. And in India, it is even bigger. So what we're trying to do is that, again, we can't do this alone. The basic concept is that we want to make a difference and impact in India. And it's not only about medicines, that we bring innovative medicine and we can cure cancer at some point of time in future, the way we are developing innovative medicine. But what we are working in India is how do we bring a stage shift of lung cancer detection. So usually lung cancer, 90% of lung cancer detection is done at late stage, stage 4, which is too late. If we can detect it at stage 1, with bringing innovation and collaboration, we can make a big difference. So what we're trying to do is we have partnered with the Health Ministry of Government of Karnataka and Government of Goa as the first 2 steps in last 4 to 5 months. And we have said that all X-rays which are being done in the government hospitals, we will collaborate with the government and as a part of policy that these X-rays and apply a technology to it, which is AI technology, which can detect lung nodules early and can bring a stage shift. So we have just started this big stuff. We have done about 400,000 scans across India already. And our ambition is that if we can bring a stage shift with innovation, with technology, with partnership, we can make a big difference. And it's a long journey. You can't achieve it. But if we can start doing with states, with government, and we can a tangible differentiation, that's one starting point. The second starting point, the second point which we are trying to do is also innovation and sustainability. So I'm now talking about climate part. So we have to bring sustainability in future looking, how we become sustainable supply chain. So one is doing in the R&D, but what we are trying to do for India is that, happy to share, we are planting 64 million trees in Meghalaya. 64 million trees and maintaining it for 30 years ourselves. And I'm really passionate, proud about what we can do for India as a global multinational company, but in India for India. So making an impact on people, society, and the planet, we need a lot of innovation, a lot of collaboration, but with a purpose that we have to make a change into the planet via innovation, but also can we help eliminate lung cancer as a cause of death in the country. So very tangible, but you need to go to the ground level, partnership, collaborate with a purpose, but it's a long journey. It won't happen. So these are just 2 examples to talk about how we are making it happen on ground with the growth through innovation which you want to do, but with the purpose of making a difference to the people, society, and the planet in India and around the world.
Maybe Shalabh, moving to you, right? I mean, just as Sanjeev articulated about, I mean, it's a fantastic purpose, right? I mean, you want to eradicate lung cancer, right? And then you're using technology to kind of really drive that and accelerate that, right? In the GCC world and financial services, and with all the structures that you talked about, right? Hackathons, squads, etc. I mean, how are you really making it happen?
Yeah. So I think the way we ensure that this goes beyond, let's say, a PPT or go beyond an idea is having a few very well-defined targets. And I'll just explain how. So I think we talked about sustainability, but right now I'm talking about sustainability, for example, from the climate perspective. Now, one thing which we have as our stated goal as an overall organization is we've committed to spending around 500 million pounds till 2027, over 2027, on funding climate tech startups as an example. So one is having some hard defined targets and then making sure that we execute on them. So that's one way of ensuring that whatever we set out to do, we do that with some numbers. So that's, I would say, a broader brush approach in terms of how will we invest in climate tech startups, etc. But coming to more, I would say, GCC specific things. And again, while a lot of it gets done in a GCC, but these are all global. From a colleague or from an employee perspective, we recently concluded, and I'll take an example probably of 2 weeks ago. So we actually ran a global hackathon on Gen AI. Now, just unpacking Gen AI a bit, as a bank, we have access to large amounts of data. So for example, 48 million customers over 40 countries. But then how do you leverage that data to provide you insights and where you can drive hyper localized service to the customer? So which is where the whole Gen AI concept comes in. So fast forward, we ran a hackathon globally, thousands of people participated on that. And what we've done is, just to ensure that we take it to conclusion, is those 5 of those ideas actually are funded by the CEO of the company. And we need to ensure that we take some of those to closure. And those ideas could be, or there are really, on how do you control cyber fraud as an example for a bank? How do you improve the customer service? Or how do you improve the operational efficiencies of people, which is where some of the applications like Copilot, for example, comes in. So partnering with some of these ecosystem partners, having some hard defined targets, and then taking them to closure through regular, I would say, updates and tracking is the way we make sure that we take them to closure. Now, one thing before I close, what we've also done very, very thoughtfully and deliberately is we've picked up only a few of them. So rather than saying we will do these 100 things over next 2 years, we've actually said we'll take limited number of use cases, which are, let's say, sub 20 in nature, and take them through. Because again, sometimes there's a tendency to everyone to get excited and boil the ocean, which doesn't happen. So being a bit thoughtful and focused about those things. So I think that's how we are trying to get it done within Barclays.
And I'll come back to, I think you made a lot of interesting points in that, right? And Kishore, in your, world, okay, where I guess, innovation is at the cutting edge in this very different way, right? And you emphasized on collaboration and clarity of purpose, okay? But that's a good, thought and objective to have, right? How have you seen that getting actually operationalized, right? Great to have your thoughts.
Okay. So to be different from a GCC or a pharma world, which pharma also has manufacturing, I'll talk about aerospace component manufacturing that we have in Bangalore. It's a joint venture with HAL. And we started it in 2010 through trials and tribulations, went all the way. For 10 years, we had to go through a lot of ups and downs. That was the stability phase of the business. Around 2010, actually the business was stable. Everything was working fine when COVID came. But it was a question of how do you survive during COVID times. Survival was one piece of things, but more importantly, it was about how do you showcase to the world that you can be better than the rest of the world even during these trying times. So our plant and the Karnataka government actually gave an exception and allowed us, the aerospace industry was allowed to continue the manufacturing processes or any other work that they did in Karnataka. So in Bangalore, we were able to operate the unit. And so with minimal number of people, we were able to continue to operate. And that was a time that really innovation came about there because they had to learn how to be more optimal in how they did their entire process. And as we went through that journey, we figured out it's very good for us to say some of the jigs and fixtures were all made in a way that you just could do one part at a time. What does it take to have two parts at a time? And so this is not something that the leadership brought down, but it's the operators themselves who basically brought these ideas. And that is what I meant by the culture piece of things. And when they brought it up, it was not just them, but they had to find people who will help them implement these ideas. So when it was a testing idea, we employed an engineering college in Coimbatore, Ramakrishna Engineering. Students came from there, worked on this project along with their professor's guidance. They created a testing tool for it. And so here we had the academia coming in and helping with that process, cutting down the times on that. And then that one was adopted globally after that with our other factories. Now we do the same thing on many different other areas. And today, with a focus on IoT and the ability for machine-machine communications, human-machine interfaces being more elaborate, I think there's so much of room that has happened in our manufacturing processes that we have done so well in the first facility, we moved to a second facility. But the second facility took all the learnings from our first facility, and we didn't go about, we built a whole facility in 6 months. We came up to production in about 8 months. And now we're going to be sold out in that facility by the end of the year. So I think if we allow people to think, and you said how, I think the how has to be with the people. And how has to be the culture of how they think and how management allows them to think and how everybody is just one team that is focused on one thing, and that is to be the betterment for that process or product or service.
No, I think no, that's well said, right? And if I kind of just summarize, right, coming to this, okay, effectively, looks like the how, right, which is what successful innovators, kind of manage to do to drive interdisciplinary collaboration, is really about getting these three tenets going, right? Getting people organized, getting people mobilized, getting people aligned, right? Now, organize is not just about, I think, the internal organization, right? Because most organizations have it. But if you hear from what Sanjeev had to say in terms of how you've partnered with various government setups, right, with external vendors to kind of drive AI, recognition, okay? Or Shalabh, as you were talking about, right? You're working with a whole bunch of external partners out there, right, to kind of drive the sustainability agenda, right? So there is an organized part which is both internal and external, okay? And in fact, it goes back to what Dr. Jere was indicating that, it's not the usual suspects of maybe the IITs which are going to drive innovation, but it's a much broader spread of AICT, right? So there's one theme around that. There's a second theme which is around mobilizing, okay? Now, mobilizing needs to happen at all levels, right? Right from the very shop floor, as Kishore, you pointed out, okay? To the, to the classical squads and hackathons that you talked about, or to, more sophisticated, mobilizations, done through, through your experience centers, etc. Right? And I think lastly, all of this needs to be brought together by aligning these people together, right? Which fundamentally means very simple, but very, very clear, hard targets, okay? And these targets have got to be non-negotiable, right? You said you're going to commit a 500 million pounds to that, right? Or, right, I mean, classically, if I look back at what Procter & Gamble had done a few years back, they said every single innovation needs to have 50% of external input, right? That was a hard code, okay? Right? And that's a hard code, which kind of drives it up. So I think, in summary, I think we could go on, right, and get another round of thoughts. But I'll just like to wrap up with this. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, colleagues, for this interesting discussion.
Check. Thank you to our panelists.